Today we're going to be discussing the emergence of opera during the Baroque period. As we discovered in our first lecture, the Baroque period as a whole started roughly around the year 1600. In and of itself, Baroque music was a dramatization of music. But within Baroque music, there emerged opera. Now for the first time, drama was combined with music to form opera. Around the year 1575 in Florence, a group of nobles and composers and aristocrats got together and they wanted to do something unique. They wanted to recapture the essence of ancient Greek tragedy. The records regarding how music was performed during the times of the ancient Greeks was sparse, but nevertheless they believed that ancient Greek drama involved a style of music which was somewhere between speech and singing. And this semi-declamatory style was what they tried to imitate in their early opera. So indeed, opera itself emerged in its true sense around the year 1600. One of the earliest recorded operas was Eurydice by Jacopo Peri, and that was staged in Florence in 1600 approximately. And then there was the famous composer of the early Baroque, Claudio Monteverdi. We're going to explore the works of Monteverdi in more detail today. And of course in 1607, Monteverdi launched his famous Orfeo, or Orpheus, which also dealt with an ancient Greek topic. We're going to explore the myth of Orpheus and his descent into Hades, the underworld of the ancient Greeks. We're going to look at the whole story in more detail, but these were the prominent names in early opera. As we said, opera was an invention of the Baroque period, invented in Italy roughly around 1600. Now, what exactly is the difference between opera and drama? Well, the main difference is in opera, the music is the drama. Certain plots wouldn't make sense if they were performed as plays. Opera has many of the characteristics of drama, of plays, but that which drives the plot forward is in fact the music. The music underpins everything. It allows otherwise silly plots and stories to seem plausible. This is the magic of opera. The music invigorates the plot. In its early days, opera was seen to be something appreciated by the aristocracy. But with time, it has become the music of the popular audience. To forge an opera, a composer collaborates with the librettist. The librettist selects the words. He is a dramatist. But the composer of an opera too must be a dramatist. He must be sensitive to the meaning of the words. His understanding of the interplay between music and drama is critical. It's not enough that a composer of opera is a great composer. He has to be sensitive to the exact moment at which a certain aria should be sung, when the orchestra should enter. All these nuances of dramatization are just as important to the composer of opera as to the librettist. They work together closely and collaborate, and they bring about an opera. Now, essentially, the plots of operas are actually often rather silly and nonsensical. There is this notion that passion doesn't emerge in people as being sensible. It is critical in opera that there is passion. The people are worked up. They are full of love and violence and strong emotions. This is opera, and often this emerges from what would seem to be a rather whimsical plot. So that is the thing. Now, of course, there are the two types of opera. There is serious opera, known otherwise as opera seria, and then there is the more comic opera, known as opera buffa, because many operas use elements of both styles. Also, within opera, there is recitative. As we mentioned, the recitative style of singing, which emerged in the early Baroque, involved a style of singing which was meant to imitate the pitch and the rhythm of speech. It was a speech-like style of singing, a declamatory style of singing. Now, this declamatory style of recitative is more common, in fact, in opera buffa, but it forms a part of opera. We're going to see later on how recitatives interacted with arias in late Baroque operas, and in fact, the interplay between the two is quite important. Operas, especially those from the 18th century onwards, tended to have overtures, but from the 18th century onwards, the overture was a fixed thing. It tended to draw on material from later on in the plot. So it gave the audience a foretaste of that which was to come. Of course, sometimes it's known as a prelude, sometimes it's known as an overture. It depends on what's going on exactly. But these are details. We mentioned the Camerata who got together in 1575, and they wanted to create new depths of expression and emotion. Now, Monteverdi himself really plumbed the depths of human emotion. He employed very stark and daring dissonance in his works. He really sought to imbue music with new degrees of emotion previously unheard. As we mentioned, the libretti of operas of this time in the early Baroque tended to revolve around Greek mythology and ancient history. These were popular topics for hundreds of years. Opera tended to use virtuoso singers, but what no longer exists today is the idea of the castrato. Poor families in Italy a few hundred years ago were willing to allow their talented sons who had good voices to be castrated to preserve their voices. The castrato later on in life had a unique voice. It wasn't exactly a female voice. It had certain virtuosic qualities which can no longer be imitated. In fact, there were certain operas which can no longer be performed today because we no longer have castrati. The last castrato died about over 100 years ago, and there are still recordings of this castrato. They had a unique sound of voice, quite intriguing. Now, as we mentioned during the late Baroque, opera was more standardized. There was now this recognizable interplay between the arias and the recitatives. The aria is always one of the high points of the opera. It often takes an ABA form, what is known as a da capo aria. We have the initial thematic material in the A section, then we have the B section which contrasts with the A section, and then when the A section returns, it is often modified slightly. The singer is expected to employ all sorts of virtuosic techniques to embellish the initial A section material. So this is the ABA form, known otherwise as the da capo aria. As you know, in music, a da capo means to return to the beginning of the piece. Capo is the head. So a da capo aria takes this ABA form. And of course, often the recitative will lead into the aria. Now, when these recitatives are accompanied merely by basso continuo, which, as we discussed in our first lecture in this series on the Baroque, tended to be some instrument in the bass range, often a harpsichord or a bassoon or some such instrument, which gave a simple outline of the chords and their progressions. This was known as the basso continuo. Now, for instance, in Orfeo, the work actually uses a bass lute, and one other instrument, it has an unusual basso continuo. So instrumentation, as we discussed, was not standardized during the Baroque. When a recitative is sung at a high point in the drama and suddenly the whole orchestra accompanies the singer, this is known as a recitativo accompagnato, an accompanied recitative, versus the recitative which only has the backing of the basso continuo, which is known as a recitativo secco, a dry recitative. We are going to explore the composer Claudio Monteverdi. We're going to look at his opera Orpheus, or Orfeo as it was known in Italian, and to look at the plot and to understand Monteverdi's contributions to the opera of the early Baroque period. Claudio Monteverdi lived during the early Baroque era. His style connects the music between the 16th and 17th centuries. He was born in Cremona, Italy. He worked for the court of Mantua for 21 years, first as a singer and a violinist, and then as a music director. In 1613, he became the music director of St. Mark's in Venice. All of his music, such as his madrigals, church music and opera, was vocal music. He wanted to imbue music with unprecedented emotion. To this end, he employed daring dissonance. Monteverdi was the first composer of operatic masterpieces. His earliest operatic masterpiece was Orfeo, composed in 1607. Orfeo was Monteverdi's first opera. He composed the work in 1607 for the Mantuan court. The story revolves around Orpheus, a talented mythological Greek musician. Orpheus was the son of the god Apollo. After Orpheus's marriage to Eurydice, he is euphoric. However, his happiness soon dissipates after his beloved is killed by a poisonous snake. Orpheus descends to the underworld of the ancient Greeks known as Hades, hoping to bring her back to life. In the merit of his beautiful music, he is allowed to bring her back on the condition that he does not look back at Eurydice. However, during a tense moment in the narrative, he does look back and she vanishes. Monteverdi uses many types of music in Orfeo, such as recitatives, arias, duets, choruses, and instrumental interludes. Tu sei morta is a recitative sung by Orpheus after he learns of Eurydice's death and resolves to bring her back. He bids farewell to the earth, sky, and sun. As this is a recitative, Orpheus's vocal line is accompanied by only the basso continuo, which consists in this case of a small organ and a bass lute. The recitative has a homophonic texture so as not to distort the meaning of the words. In the early Baroque period, it was thought that a polyphonic texture would detract from the clarity of the words. The vocal line is rhythmically free. Monteverdi uses word painting. For instance, on the word stelle, stars, and sole, sun, he employs high tones. On the words abyssi, abysses, and morte, death, he uses low tones. Here you can hear the opening of Orpheus's recitative with the words Tu sei morta mia vita. You are dead, my dearest.
Et io respiro. Tu sei da me partita. Sei da me partita per mai più non tornare. Ed io rimango. No, che se al versi alcuna cosa ponno, andrò sicura più profondi.
Here you can hear Orpheus singing a low tone on abyssi, which means abysses. Here you can hear Orpheus singing a high tone on stelle, which means stars. Here you can hear Orpheus singing a low tone on morte, which means death. Here you can hear Orpheus singing a high tone on sole, which means sun.